GeoGearHeads.
Well, I'm the Bad Cop, and welcome to episode 194 of the GeoGearHeads. Tonight we're going to be talking with Rock Chalk about the guidelines of the sport or hobby or maybe just the addiction of geocaching. But before we get into that, we have a little different show format for you tonight. Daryl has some family matters to attend to tonight, and his electricity has not been stable this week, so please keep him in your thoughts. But even without Daryl, the show must go on. So, I've asked the most talented monkey I know. Some say he can fill in at the drop of a hat, and others say he actually lives in front of his computer just waiting for someone to ask. All we know is that he's called Land Monkey.
Hey, thank you very much. I didn't know it was that obvious that I'm a geocaching podcast. Trying to think of a nice word, but I can't think of it.
You're the go-to monkey.
Yeah, the go-to monkey. You know what? That's an even nicer word. But I'll tell you, folks, we have a jam-packed show. It is a show that is completely full of jam tonight. So let's get a couple things out of the way. And first of all, most importantly, I would like to welcome Chris Ronan, Rock Chalk, Community Volunteer Support Coordinator, to our program.
Hello. Very glad to be here.
Now, Chris, we ask a question each week at the end of the show. And last week, we asked our attentive listeners to simple email a question to you.
Simply.
Okay. Wow. This is what happens when I was reading. I don't read through the script before the show, so I'm just going to start adding things on here for Daryl to build up the list. All right. Anyways, we asked our attentive listeners simply to email a question for Chris, for Rock Chalk. And out of all those entries, all of them, the millions that came in, were put into the world's biggest ammo can, shaken up by an 800-pound gorilla. And, Chris, can you tell us who was picked as the winner?
I can. The winner is CJ Rickard. R-I-C-K-A-R-D. CJ Rickard.
Congratulations,
Yes.
CJ Rickard. And since you are the winner, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start off this very episode with your question. So, CJ Rickard sent us a question by email, as we asked him to do. Said, would you, and this question is directed to you, Rock Chalk, you must get the same questions over and over. What question do you wish people would ask so that you could answer it? And then please follow up with an answer to that question.
And that is such a good question. It's one of the best questions I've ever heard, and I wish I had an amazing answer to it. And the truth is I've been kind of stumped on it because I've been thinking about it for a couple of days now. But I think the thing that I've come to a couple of times as I've thought about that question is something that I tend to ask other people, which is if there was something that you wish you knew when you started geocaching that you didn't know that you do know now. And for me personally, the answer to that goes to hiding geocaches. When I first started, I think a lot of us, we start playing the game and we find some caches and then we feel like we want to contribute back to the game by hiding our own. And you get very anxious about it, and sometimes you just put something out as soon as you can. And I put caches out like everybody does when I first started out, and they were fine. There was nothing wrong with them. But when I look at the caches that I have now that I put out more recently, I think they're a lot more creative. I think they're a lot more enjoyable for people to find. And I think if I could go back, I probably would have waited a little bit longer until I'd seen more caches and had a chance to see how creative people can be with them, and then kind of let the creative juices flow a little bit more for me. But like I said, it's not that I'm not proud of what I put out early, but I think the stuff I've put out more recently I'm really, really proud of. And so that maybe is the question that I would ask and then answer.
There you go. I think that's a great question. So well done, Chris. Nice one that you came up with. Before the show, the Bad Cop and I were throwing around some other options for Chris, the question that he wishes he was answered, and I think they were along the lines of, Chris, can I buy you a beer, or what's your favorite coffee shop that we can get you a card for?
What's your size? Can I send you a free T-shirt?
Yeah, I've never asked those questions either, but I would love to answer them if anybody wants to ask them. So yeah.
There you go. Everybody heard it. Now you know. All
Yeah.
right. So why don't we just jump right into some more of the questions, if you're all right with that, Chris?
I am. Let's go.
All right. Well, DSMS99 emailed, and they said, now you'll have this question before, is there any chance virtual caches will make a return?
No. So is that? Do I need to expound on that one?
Maybe
Now,
brief.
when you say no, that means maybe, right?
No. And you know, I understand. As somebody who's found a ton of them myself, and I love them, I understand why people want them back. All I can say is that there are no plans to bring them back, and I just think it's fair to be very straight with people about that. There's that whole thing about never say never. I would say never in this case. I've never heard it ever being a possibility. So I just think no is the best answer to give.
Fair enough. We've got another question that comes from a cacher local to me, and as if I'm not mistaken, one of the board of directors of the BC Geocaching Association, Brylang. And Brylang emailed and asked, and this is a pretty good question, I like this one. Can you please clarify the guideline for using screws or nails to attach a geocache to a standing but dead tree? I once saw a cache featured on geocaching.com's Facebook page, or face page book, that was attached to a dead tree with screws or nails. Obviously, that is not allowed with live trees.
Yeah, and that's always a tough subject. What I will say is that there's nothing in the guidelines about dead trees. We address not damaging wildlife and not damaging plant life. What I will say is that when we have the opportunity to say something about it, we really strongly discourage even dead trees for screwing caches into. And the reason for that, there's actually a couple of reasons. One is that very few of us are arborists, and therefore we don't always know whether a tree is living or dead. I mean, that seems like it should be obvious, but it's the number of times when it's been brought to us by a land manager and they say, hey, somebody screwed something into this tree, and the person says, I thought it was dead, and it's like, well, no, we have an expert who says it's not. So there's that. Another reason is that a lot of times you and I, all of us, we've seen caches like that. We see them and we think, oh, that's so cool, I want to do one like that. And we go and we put it somewhere else, and we think the tree is dead. Maybe it turns out not to be, and then you've got a problem there too. So what we prefer to do is encourage people to come up with creative ways that don't involve screwing into the tree, whether it's alive or dead, for those reasons.
So if I was to maybe summarize, the default answer is just don't use screws or nails?
Well, yeah, I mean, on trees, I mean, it tends to be, it's like better safe than sorry kind of a thing.
Right.
And yeah, it doesn't mean they're not out there, because they certainly are. And if somebody brings it to our attention, we'll look at it, or if a reviewer is concerned about it, we'll look at it. But yeah, we discourage it. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough.
Good one. Well, like I said at the beginning of the show, we just have a bucket load of, or an ammo can load, I should say, of questions. This one comes from G Slink and Slinky Mama. There's a three-part question here. So, number one, how does the appeal process work for times when a reviewer may have violated guidelines?
So, if somebody feels like a reviewer has violated guidelines in any way, what you'd want to do is contact us through our help center, and be very specific about if you feel like something incorrect has happened. I can tell you that sometimes we might hear from somebody that says, my reviewer did this, or doesn't like me, won't publish my caches, and that's all they say, and we'll say, okay, well, give us an example of what you're talking about, and we usually don't hear back at that point. So we take it very seriously if there's an accusation of some sort. but we need to have very specific details about what may or may not have happened.
So the next part, very good answer, by the way. The next part, is there a change coming to needs maintenance submissions or any additional entries being considered?
I take that question to mean, will there be new log entries other than needs maintenance? And at this point, no, there are no plans for anything or any changes to that. It will still be needs maintenance, and there are no plans to add to the log entry options that are in there.
Nice.
Chris, before you go to the next question, can I just ask an addendum to number 2 there? Can we set a threshold that new cachers have to find 100 caches before they're allowed to post a needs maintenance or a needs archived?
Well, in a question like that, it's similar to, can we tell somebody they can't hide a cache until they found 100 or whatever? And the problem with that, and I get the logic behind it, but what I usually say in response to that is, there are a lot of people who have found 5,000 caches who don't necessarily know when the right time is or when the ideal time is to do a needs archive versus a needs maintenance. So and then sometimes you'll have somebody who's only found 20 caches who's incredibly knowledgeable and really takes to it very quickly. So find counts and hide counts aren't as indicative of knowledge as I used to think they were, honestly, from having been in this job for a year now. Now that I've been doing it a little while, I tend to not place as much weight into how many caches a person has found versus how many they've hidden. But I totally understand the logic behind those types of questions.
Great answer. Great answer.
It really was a great answer. On to the third part. They asked, now that GPSRs are so much more accurate these days, can we please get the distance between caches lowered to 264 feet?
The answer to that is that it's an issue that comes up here, and it's something that I think will always be talked about. There is nothing imminent coming, any changes to the 0.1 mile guideline. And the basic reason for that is that with a lot of land managers, it's not necessarily the accuracy issue that is the driving issue behind that decision. These days, it's more about land managers and property owners, and for a lot of them, knowing that there's a certain distance that there has to be between caches, knowing that therefore there's a limit to how many could necessarily be placed in a certain area, makes them more amenable to geocaching being on their lands. And so I think that's going to be one of the main drivers of that issue if the guideline ever were to change. I don't think it'll be so much a matter of GPS accuracy as it will be more about those property and land management issues.
I completely agree with that. We've up here in the Northwest, we recently had a update of geocaching policy from the city of Portland.
Yes.
It says you can only have a certain number of geocaches in a park. It doesn't matter how large the park is. So I completely understand that.
Absolutely, yeah, and those policies vary from place to place. And I know cachers in all kinds of states can talk about, or countries can talk about how land managers either, they run the gamut from really loving geocaching and understanding what a great benefit it can be to bringing people to their lands and showing them their lands in a very positive way, to some that maybe aren't as welcoming of it and who we're hoping we can change their minds over time. So yeah.
In the live Q&A, we have Limax, and he says, I remember when it used to be 0.2 miles. So maybe he's showing his age. I don't particularly remember that one. So
yeah, and that predates me as well. I can't speak with much authority on that.
Wow. Yeah, that's, well, there you go. We should be thankful that it's 0.1 miles. All right. Well, we've got another email that came in from Team Maveju. And they say, recently at a local event, we played with ideas on how to spice things up before or during an event. We came up with a couple of ideas, which could have worked. Number one, have a multi-cache style path to the location of the event so that there was a chance to show off the local points of interest, views, statues, buildings, etc., before people would actually get to and visit the event. Number two, have the ability to place a bunch of caches for a day so that it would be possible to do an introduction day for newbies or a treasure hunt during the event, even if it means that they're not placed fully in accordance to the various restrictions Groundspeak puts on them with regards to distance of already existing caches in the local area. So they said, we took this up with our local Groundspeak reviewer, who said, there's nothing I can do here. Event locations need to be accurate for physical caches. Event locations need to be accurate, and for physical caches, you need to have to place them. Let me try that again. The reviewer said, event locations need to be accurate, and for physical caches, you have to place them in accordance to the guidelines of Groundspeak, i.e., expect the cache to be there at least 3 months and have at least 160 meters away from any other physical cache. So, while everything in the Groundspeak guidelines is focused on making long-term physical caches workable, there is, in these guidelines, very little to make them short-term event-related caches workable. Is Groundspeak aware of these limitations for event-related caches, and are there any plans on overcoming them?
Yes. We are aware that there is a desire to be able to do things like that for events that the obvious answer to that is lab caches that you see at mega events usually. And so we are aware of it, and I think what we're hoping is that something like lab caches can satisfy that need somewhere down the line. The trouble we have right now, and what needs to be resolved first, is that anybody who's done a lab cache knows how wonky our web browser interface is when you're trying to find labs when you're out in the field. Because it's not integrated into the app in any way. There is no way to use an app to do that. So you've got your smartphone, you've got your browser window open, your web browser. For those people that haven't found a lab, this is the way it works. You pull it up and you navigate to it using your smartphone with your web browser, and it's not a good experience. And so we need to solve that first. And once we do, I think that hopefully some version of labs might be something that solves that event issue, that of being able to have a caching experience at an event that doesn't necessarily involve physical caches.
Very cool. Looking forward to hearing more about that.
Mm-hmm. Next question comes from Team Pugach, and they ask, how did you become a volunteer?
Oh, I'm not a volunteer. I actually work at geocaching. So if I become a volunteer, and I guess it'll mean they stop sending my paycheck to me, and in which case,
you have to take
I became a volunteer
in the morning.
Involuntarily.
So you're a voluntold, not a volunteer.
Yeah, but so for now, I'm very much an employee of Groundspeak, and if I become a volunteer, it will be after a different conversation. But if they are, I think maybe if the question is how do you become a volunteer, we do have something in our help center, an article if people ever want to go and look at it. It's called Becoming a Community Volunteer Reviewer. So that's the main volunteer would be a reviewer. And so basically, how do you become a reviewer? And those people are candidates for being a reviewer are typically identified collaborating with the current review team in that area. And so what we do, and there's a whole list of things here in the Help Center article, I'll just go over a couple of them. We look for people that are active in their community as a geocacher, as a cache owner, and as an event organizer. They're consistent in their cache ownership. They have well-maintained caches that adhere to the guidelines. They have a positive reputation in their local caching community. They're involved in their local caching organizations, and then ability to communicate effectively online and in English. So what we basically tell people is work on those things, and if the opportunity comes up, you might be asked, you might be tapped on the shoulder.
Well, good.
Right on. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the next question we had was from Tangent, and we just wanted to let Tangent know we didn't ignore your question, but Chris answered it. And that was, what criteria or process do they use in selecting a geocacher for a reviewer slot? So thank you for being so efficient, Chris.
Yeah, and I do encourage people to check out that Help Center article. If you just go to our Help Center on our website and search for becoming a community volunteer reviewer, it's got all that stuff, and you can take a look at it, and it may make more sense than how I read it out loud. So it's there for you anytime.
Now, this next question comes from, I believe it's Guguy, G-E-U-G-U-Y. Says, how can a geocacher log a cache without writing anything? Not even TFTC, and that's only 4 letters. I've seen this a few times. Talk about short logs. And he gives a couple examples here.
Yeah, you know, I actually talked to our engineers about that a little bit, and as far as they're aware, you can't do that via our website or geocaching apps. So it's possible that somebody may have used a different app than our apps to be able to do that. But there's also just the issue of talking about short logs, and it's something that we certainly encourage people and have always encouraged people and will continue to tell people that a cache log shouldn't just be about TFTC or period, as I've seen in a couple of my caches recently. But saying a little something about the experience and you know, saying what it meant to you to find the cache. Yeah, anybody that's done the headquarters tour here in Seattle, Holly, who is our guest experience coordinator there at the front desk, she every time just drives it into people. She shows this TV monitor in our lobby that is constantly updating with, it's got a Google map, and it's constantly updating with caches that have just been logged around the world. And so you'll see the Google map, it'll go around the globe, and then it'll zero in on a spot where a cache was logged, and it'll show you the log. And woe be to the person who just said TFTC, and Holly sees it because she really she said something about it in her spiel during the tour. So so we're going to keep doing that and keep encouraging people to do it. But at the end of the day, if that's what somebody wants to say is TFTC or period or gosh, just a space, then I don't know.
Yeah, if somebody went to the effort to hide a geocache for you to find, at least say something.
Yeah, I think we can all agree to that. I mean, I think we'd all like to see that. So I like to try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they hit send and they didn't mean to, or whatever. I don't know. Maybe they had to run the kid to school, or maybe, I don't know. There could be 1,000 reasons why they couldn't write 3 paragraphs, but I wish they would.
Yeah, well, and you don't even need to write 3 paragraphs. I think, and often I think when people put a TFTC, just in my opinion, Chris, it's that there was something unremarkable about the cache to them. So they thought, well, whatever, I don't really have much to say about this. But you know what? Sometimes as the cache owner, even if it's an unremarkable cache, it's nice to just have log was in good condition. Something like that, right? I mean, it doesn't take you that much time to just give a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I make it a habit to always say the condition of the log and container at the end of my logs. You know, tell them why I found the cache, and tell them, you know, hey, by the way, your container's in good shape. You don't have to go out and check it today.
Sure.
No.
Well, and I think actually on this topic, we just had something pop into the Q&A on that bad cup. Did you want to, from Wet Coaster, did you want to grab that one?
Got it. He says, how about people that just want to quickly log a TFTC, then expand on it later?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, there's a lot of people, you'll see that a lot of times with first defines, won't you, where somebody will say, hey, FTF, more later, and then you check it a week later and they write a lot more about their experience because they want their fellow FTF hounds to know that the cache has been found. So yeah, that's another possibility too. I know there's been times when I'll be traveling, especially if I want to make sure I log the cache before I forget. But then I might go back later and say a little bit more about it. So yeah, that's a very reasonable thing to say too.
Exactly.
There you go.
It's a good idea. Now I feel better about this.
There you go.
I know they're going to come back later and say more.
Excellent. Yes, that's the positive spin on it. Well, we've got another email that came in from Antaeus. And Antaeus wrote, when can we expect to see the features of the paid app rolling into the geocaching intro app, like saving caches offline, trackables, etc.?
Well, I think you're going to see trackables start to roll into the intro app very soon. Maybe as soon as this month. I think you'll, and it's going to happen in phases. It's not going to be just bang, everything's there. It's going to be rolled out in stages. So, but you are going to see something with trackables rolling into the intro app very soon. Offline caches are going to be down the road further, but eventually. But the first thing that you'll see is trackables.
Cool.
Nice. So the next question is from Limax, who I know is listening live. Says, my question for RockChalk is, will there be any changes to pocket queries in the future? Currently, I'm running 20 pocket queries at 1,000 caches each, and that may yield around 15,000 caches due to overlap in circles in order to allow for full coverage. It would be nice for rectangular shapes to allow for less overlap of queries.
Well, the bad news for Limax is no, there are no plans to change pocket queries, but the good news is that as we continue to build out the new search functionality to where eventually, of course, you're going to be able to download caches from your search results. What we intend to do is look at options for defining download areas other than point radius regions in that process. So no to the pocket query thing, but hopefully we can address some of his desires as we build out the search functionality.
Sounds good. We had another email. Chris, we're just going to keep going at this as fast as we can with you and try and keep you on your toes there.
All right.
We had another email that came in from Wet Coaster, and I think he's looking for a personal recommendation for geocaches in your area. He says, what cache would you recommend for somebody visiting where you live if you could only recommend one cache?
Gosh, that is so hard, and I think especially when you're here in Seattle and we have the HQ cache, of course. I mean, that's everybody wants to. You would recommend that to anybody, of course. But I think for me personally, just because I like hiking and I like being out doing tree climbing caches, and I like kayaking for caches and stuff like that. I think if it was me, I would. My favorite recent cache was actually Jeremy Irish and I went hiking earlier this summer, and we went to Mailbox Peak, which is about an hour or so, hour and a half east of Seattle in the Snoqualmie Pass area, and it's a great hike. It's 7 to 9 miles round trip, and I think you gain around 4,000 feet of elevation. And for the people here in the Northwest who have done it, you know that there's an actual mailbox at the top of the at the summit of the peak, and there's a cache very near the mailbox. So it was a lot of fun to make that hike with Jeremy and to be able to do that. But it's a hard thing. It's like there's so many great caches wherever you live. I mean, I'm from the Midwest and only moved here to Seattle about a year ago, and so I can tell you about a ton of great caches in Kansas and Missouri and Nebraska, and South Dakota just popped into my head. I mean, we all have those. So it's so hard to recommend one, isn't it? I mean, Gosh, that's a tough one.
I do like your recommendation, though. That's not one that I've done when I've been down in that area. Just this past summer, a Bad Cop, Woods End, and we took our crew and hiked up to GCD, which was also an amazing view up there. But Mailbox Peak sounds good. I'm gonna have to put that on my list.
You should, and there's a number of caches on the way up too, and Mailbox Peak used to be much harder to get up to. They've now built a trail that's a little more gradual, and so it's not the lung buster that it necessarily used to be, but it's still a challenging hike, and gosh, we've got so many of those around here. I mean, the great thing about for people that came for Block Party or people that come any other time is there's all these great urban hides here in Seattle, but then you go an hour and you're into the mountains, and you go 3 hours the other direction, and we're up in Vancouver with you. So there's a lot of great caches out here.
There really are. Now, I do have to ask a defining question. You said it's about a 4,000-foot elevation gain?
That's what I remember.
Or is it at 4,000 feet?
No, I want to say that it starts at around I forget what it starts at, but I want to say you gain 4,000 feet over the course of that hike. It's a pretty strenuous, and of course somebody's going to write in and correct me on what the exact footage is, but it is a significant it's a pretty significant climb.
Nice. Now, in the Q&A, we're going to go back a question or two here.
Okay.
Limax asks, we're talking about pocket queries again. Says, does that mean pocket queries are going away eventually?
I think there will probably come a time, the way the thinking is right now, and things can change obviously, but the thinking is that eventually if we build out the search function the way that we plan to, pocket queries may not be relevant somewhere down the road. But that's a ways off, and of course they will continue to be supported for the foreseeable future unless and until the day that they're no longer relevant. But that's going to be some time, obviously. But our hope is that as we build this search out, that the downloading will be so robust that that will take care of what you would have handled with pocket queries, and hopefully then some.
Right. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot, Chris.
Okay.
When do you think that functionality for actually downloading or getting better search results will be functional?
Well, and I wish I could answer that. I'm not on the product team, so I can't say what their current hope is for that. I know that it's very top of mind, and they are aware, not only because they want it, but because people like me are back there every day knocking on their door saying, hey, when's this going to happen? Because as much as I personally really love the search tool, I don't use the old search. I know a lot of people still do. I don't. I'm planning a trip to Spokane this weekend, and I've been going through. It's great to be able to search by favorite point and all of that stuff, but it drives me crazy that I have to go into each listing and then get the GPX file or send it straight to my GPS. So hopefully sooner than later. That's about the best I can say on that. I really wish I could give you the exact date.
No, I understand. I put you on the spot. That wasn't a question we had lined up, but since you mentioned it, I thought I'd just throw it in there.
Yeah, no, it's an issue near and dear to my heart, believe me.
Chris, I just wanted to tell you that I thought that was a much better answer than the one I would have given, which was go ask Jamie.
Yeah, that's right. Jamie or Jamie's husband, yes.
Yeah, Jamie or Ben, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, we have one more question. This one comes from Shermanator18. It goes, for multi-caches, for multi-caches, do physical waypoints have to be placed a certain distance from each other?
For your own multi-cache, no. They can be as close together as you want them to be. Of course, they are still subject to proximity guidelines with other physical caches. But I have a couple of multis where the physical waypoints are mere feet from each other. So yeah, the proximity guidelines don't apply to your multi-cache within that same multi-cache. But of course they do apply as related to different physical caches in the area.
So if I can expound on that, and I'm just thinking this off the top of my head, if there isn't a physical cache for a waypoint or a physical container, do they still are they still applied to the boundary limits? Meaning, if a waypoint is a sign, and I just need you to get information off of that sign.
So if it's a virtual waypoint, you're basically saying.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, no, virtual waypoints aren't subject to proximity. So for instance, sometimes we might get a person that wants to, I'm just trying to think of an example. For instance, I have a cache that starts at a monument, and people have to get information off of a plaque from that monument to take them to the next stage and the stage after that. And I believe that there's a physical cache 50 feet or 100 feet from that monument. And so, no, my virtual waypoint doesn't conflict with the physical waypoints of other caches.
That's what I assumed, but I don't know if I'd ever actually heard or read that. So it's good to know.
Does it matter? Now, I want to just continue to expand on this just for a minute because I'm curious about this, Chris. If that virtual waypoint is the first waypoint of your multi, therefore it's where the symbol is, then does it matter?
No. I mean, does it? Give me an example. I might be missing something.
Okay, so in your example of where there's, let's say, 50 feet away.
For instance, I have a multi here in Seattle that starts at a library.
Okay.
With information outside the library. It's plaques, signs outside the library.
Yep.
So the symbol is there. It's on the library.
Right.
So from there, what would the question be? So
what if there's a physical cache that was previously placed 50 feet from that library?
Yeah. No, it wouldn't. There wouldn't be a proximity conflict. No.
Okay. Good to know. That answers my question. Thank you, Chris.
All right. You're welcome.
Well, that's what we have for tonight's show. Let's see. Do we have anything in the Q&A? We have one from Nighthawk 700. So let's do this. It says, also a good use for Where I Go. All stages can be virtual. Answer a question and move on. So there you have it. The stages of a Where I Go can be virtual as well.
Yes, that's true.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I know I appreciated it, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. Now, we mentioned at the top of the show that each week we like to ask you, our faithful listeners, a question for a chance to win a prize, this week from coinsandpins.com. So, now it's time to get your email client ready. First, get a new email and address it to geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com. Next, give it the subject, question 195, because this is episode 194, 195. And in the body, you need to answer the question, what was the last episode number that we talked with Magnus of ProjectGC.com? After you include that answer, include your geocaching.com screen name and have that email directed to geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com. With the subject line, question 195. That needs to get to us by 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's Eastern Time. It's no longer Daylight Time, is it? It's just Pacific Time and Eastern Time on the 23rd. That's 1 a.m. on the 24th in the UK, or could even be 2 a.m. in Sweden. Who knows? Your name will be entered into the drawing for that prize from coinsandpins.com.
That's fantastic. That sounds like a great prize. I wish that Daryl was still giving away the Project GC memberships. I would definitely have signed up for that contest. I probably will still sign up for a Coins and Pins contest, but wow.
You know, he may have one or two of those left, so you need to listen to the next couple of episodes.
There you go. Listen closely, everybody. Particularly, I would imagine, when Magnus is going to be on the show. Daryl does work hard to schedule great shows, and hey folks, here are the upcoming shows. So, as discussed, September 24th, projectgc.com. On October 1st, the first show of October, Community Partnerships. On October 8th, it's going to be the second Caching Solo show, or Caching Solo 2. on October 5th, it is another one of the amazing randomize. It's randomize XXXVIII. That's 38. And so if you have things that you want to make sure that the GeoGearHeads are discussing on that randomize episode, get your emails in soon because there's always a big, big list.
That's right. Now, Land Monkey, I know you did that math in your head. XXXVII. Yeah, that's 38. Okay.
That's right. That's what we're going to tell everybody.
But when you get out to 7 characters there, that takes a little work. It's just one of my pet peeves. Roman numerals. I love them, except when they get long. So, what I need you to do, though, is to check the Cachamaniac websites at cachamaniacs.com. And they don't need that yet. I'm sorry. Let's try this again. Check the Cachamaniac websites at cachamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads at cachamaniacs.com, or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cachamaniac shows coming, so please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachamaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. This show's copyright 2015 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cachamaniacs. Cash with the Cachamaniacs.
Again.
Again.